Today's topic is inbound network address translation, inbound NAT for short. So how to take something from the outside and send it inside. So how to access something in your network from the outside. I wanted to make the video because way too many times I see people using it in a very dangerous way. The most classic one is I need to control my workstation remotely, so I will open remote desktop from the entire world inside to have access to my machine, which is a great way, the most awesome way to beg for ransomware or any type of attack. So I figured I would do a video to show you how to do it, so you know what not to do. But again, there are use cases where it's okay, you need to do this. The most common example I can think of is when we used to have an Exchange server internally. Some of you probably still have one. Of course, Exchange Office 365 is getting way more popular, but back in the day where you had an Exchange server internally or any email server, well, you needed to open port 25 from the outside. So anyone on the planet can connect port 25 in your network. But of course, we were putting a email security appliance in there to make sure everything was secured, right? So that was normal back in the day, but now we have Office 365 for many people, or G Suite. And next is sometimes I see people doing, again, that remote desktop and open it to the outside world. And sometimes they say, well, JP, I don't get it. I got thousands and millions of denied failed login attempt on my domain controller. Like, yes, you open it from the outside. People are doing brute force until they find the password. Once they find the password, they connect, download a ransomware, click it, and move on to the next target. So do not open remote desktop from the outside. But today I'll show you how to do it because many wants to do it. And I'll show you, the main reason of the video is to show you how to do it in a more secured way, right? So first will be to go with controlling the source IP, because you may have occurrence where you need to open something from the outside to a third-party company which has a external fixed IP. So then you can just do your inbound NAT and only allow it from their external IP, which is a much better approach to open outbound connection to any resources inside your network. In the event where the source, the person that needs to connect as a dynamic IP, I'll show you something I like to do is to kind of gate that NAT with authentication. So you need to first authenticate to the firewall with a valid user password, and then the NAT will be allowed to you. So it's still not as good as a VPN, but it's way better than allowing the entire planet to connect to your network. Also, I'll show how to change the port, because some people tend to believe that, well, hackers can do cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and remote shell and do some amazing things, but they'll never think about me doing remote desktop on 3390 instead of 3389. I'm smart. No, right? If they can think about it, if you can think about changing the port, I'm sure hackers can think about it as well. So, but I'll still show you how to do it, because there are very legit reason to change the port. And there are some that are really bad, like doing remote desktop on 3390 instead of 3389. So that's not a security measure, but I'll still show you how to do it. And best will always remain VPN. So I'm not going to cover it. I've done videos on VPN. One of the really good way is to use the VPN that you have built in with the firewall, right? That's an easy way to gain a quick access to watch cameras, for instance, right? So you turn on your VPN on your iPhone, then look at the cameras. You're done looking at what you wanted to see, disconnect your VPN, and off you go. For work from home, where you do need to connect remote desktop and you may have different machines, people use their home computers or any type of device where you don't have control, where we have the SonicWall SMA, which is a dedicated work from home solution. And it has an amazing interface where it's clientless, it's all web based, there's no Java, no ActiveX, all HTML5, so works on any modern device, and you can control what people do, and everything is presented in a web interface, no client to install. So it is a really good product, and I'll put a link in the description box down below about this solution. So if you like the topic I'm about to talk, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. And before I move on, some little housekeeping item. I feel I need to go back to the basic at explaining what is a TCP IP packet, because we'll do NAT, which include playing with ports, source IP, destination IP. We'll create access rule, which include again playing with source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port. So I feel I needed to cover the basics, so that will help hopefully many to understand what the demo will be today. So a packet, when it travels on the internet, let's say I am in New York and I want to connect remote desktop, or the example I'll do today is connect web. I don't have a web server in my place, so I use my printer, which has a small web interface. So I want to connect from a remote location. I'm traveling, I'm in New York, and I want to connect to something in my network. So a TCP IP packet will travel from New York, from a machine that the firewall has no control over with, right? The firewall is in, let's say, Toronto in the office, and my end user is in New York. So the end user in New York will initiate a communication, send a packet on the internet, which will make its way from New York to the office firewall in Toronto. So that packet will have a source IP, which will be the laptop in New York, a destination IP, which will be your firewall in Toronto, a source port, and a destination port. So if you do remote desktop, the destination port is 3389. The source port will be usually a random port, usually over 20,000, I would say. The same goes for the example I'll do today. I will use my printer that has a web interface. So it is HTTP. HTTP is port 80. But port 80 is the destination port. It's not the source port. The source port will always be, again, a random port. It could be 43,873. So that will be the source port, and destination port will be port 80 again. So when the packet travel on the internet, and it kind of arrived at the external interface of your firewall, of course you have no control over that packet, right? You will have control in the translation you do to send that packet in your network. But when the packet goes from New York and hit your external IP, of course you have no control over the content of that packet. So when you do your NAT in the config, I'll show you, we need to match what is the IP address, ports, and everything of that inbound packet, and then we'll do a translation and change stuff in that packet. Of course, we'll change the destination IP, right? Because the destination IP of the packet when it travels on the internet is the external IP of my firewall in the head office in Toronto. We want to change that destination IP, that's the NAT, network address translation. We change the IP address so it goes to the resource internally. In my case, it's my printer 10.6.254.6. So we change that IP address. So that is the part we do the translation. So you'll see in the interface, we have source stuff and destination stuff. So very important to understand that when the packet travels on the internet, you have no control over it. When it hit the firewall, then we can do manipulation to it. And the packet has a source IP, destination IP, a source port, and a destination port. And when we talk about ports that are well-known port like remote desktop, 3389, HTTP, port 80, that is the destination port. The source port, again, is always random. Hi, I'm Jean-Pier Talbot, and welcome to my channel. So let's get into it. So here we do have my TZ470W at my house, and we'll first go into networking so you can see what we will be doing today. So as you can see, this is my external IP. It is DHCP, but for today, that's the IP I have. And I will give access from the outside to my printer, which is in here. The printer is 10.8.254.6, and it is into this zone. So we'll have to go to it, take traffic from the WAN and send it into my zone called IoT, Internet of Things zone. So many times people will have stuff coming from WAN going into the LAN. But in my case, like I always mention, it is very important to have a decent network segregation. So that's what I've done in my house. So all the Internet of Things like PlayStation, printers, and all those gizmos are all in there. And because I don't run a business, I don't have web servers, email servers, or any server to show it remote remote desktop, I will use a printer that has a web interface to make it accessible from the outside, which turned out again to be into this zone. So to do inbound NAT, you need to go into policies. We'll first go into NAT rules here. As you can see, well, by default, it's here. So that's the default view you have. Personally, I like to not see the default one. I like to change the view here for custom, so I know the one I've created. I know any inbound NAT policy that I may have. So here, as you can see, I don't have any, so I will click on add at the bottom and give it a name that means something, right? Right, inbound NAT for my printer sounds like a name that means something to me. So here we have original and translated. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, original is how my packet looks like when it's traveling on the internet and knocking on your WAN interface. So again, you have no control over that packet, right? It's how is the packet before it hits you, right? So the source of the packet, if I want to have my printer being visible to the entire world, which, like I mentioned, I would not recommend, but too many of you are doing it and are asking how to do it. So I'll show you, like I mentioned, first how to shoot yourself in the foot. Then I'll show you how to do it better. So the shoot yourself in the foot version, you start with here with any. So you just say everyone in the world, Canada, US, Mexico, Russia, China, Australia, everyone can go in. So add the packet, original packet is from anyone. The source IP will be anything. The destination IP of that packet, again, remember that's the packet before we do anything with it. That's a packet traveling from Australia down to, in my case, province of Quebec and knocking on my outside door. So the destination of that packet before I do any manipulation with it is going to be my external IP, right? So X1 IP. Because the source IP of the packet is someone in Australia and the destination IP is my external IP, like I showed you here. Service, the service in my case is HTTP, not even HTTPS, it's an old printer and it's only on HTTP. Inbound and outbound interface, you can leave them as is. Then, here is where we do our NAT, right? That's where we do manipulation, that's where we change something on the packet. So the source IP of my packet, we'll leave it to original, right? If it's a packet, if it's someone in Australia that wants to manage my printer or access my remote desktop server or whatever it is, I need in my case, my printer to be able to reply to that guy in Australia. So I need the source IP to remain the same, because if I change the source IP, well, my printer is going to reply to whatever source IP was in there. So that has to stay to original. Destination, that's where we will change it. Here I already have, I believe, yes, I already have a address object for my printer. And as you can see, it is 10.8.254.6. And if we go here, in your case, if you don't already have it, you'll do new address object. I'll just do edit to show you what I've done here. So if you do new, you need to give it a name, say it in which zone it is. Select what type of address object it is. Is it a host? In my case, yes, that's a host. It's an IP. But you could change it for a range, a network, an FQDN, or a MAC address, which of course those wouldn't work very well in an inbound NAT policy. But you know, address object are something generic that you can use for anything. So you do have the option to select those. But again, in an inbound NAT, I don't think it will work much. So here, IP address, I just put the IP address of my Lexmark printer in my internal network. So that's what we have done here. I'll show you the other tabs, but you don't have to go in there. I'm just going to show you the different options you have here. One to mention, that is not something you use much anymore. Create a reflective policy. So remember back in the day where you guys had a Exchange server internally, let's say you had 5 external IPs. One IP was the external IP of your firewall, but you could have the other 4 IP addresses also as somehow a secondary IP on your firewall. So if your MX record for your email was pointing to your 3rd IP address, you would do a NAT here, and the destination would be the 3rd IP address you have on your WAN. But the problem was, back in those days, if you get MX record to connect to your 3rd external IP, and the email server then trying to send out an email, if it was not using the 3rd IP but the main IP of the firewall, then you would be flagged as a spammer because you're sending out email on an IP that is not registered in the MX record, right? You're sending out on your 1st IP address when, if people want to send you an email, they have to use the 3rd IP address. So you were often flagged as spammer. So that's where this come into play, right? You can just say create a reflective policy and it will create, well, the reflective policy, the NAT in the other way around, allowing it to go out on a different IP address. So all that to say here, not something you need here. And here there is not much to do for the basic we want to do here. So again, we have our original packet coming from anywhere going to my external IP on HTTP. And what do I do with that packet? I keep the source IP the same. I change the destination IP from my WAN to my printer in my case, so that the world can see the web interface of my printer. And the service, I also do not change it now. I'll show you how to play with changing port later on. So just click on add. And as you can see here, we do have the name of my policy. We have the source, which is any destination IP, my external IP. Service is port 80, and the destination is the printer. Next is to do a access rule. So go into access rule. Here, click on that thing on top and select from WAN to IoT, right? And if in your case, if the resources in your LAN, you haven't done any network segregation, well, do network segregation. And, you know, stuff that you allow people from the outside to access, I believe they should be in an isolated network, and that network should not have any access to your internal network. I've seen many people having camera system and the owner wants to connect remotely and access the cameras, and they put the camera in the internal network. And of course, those camera system that you get for cheap money, they're not designed usually with security in mind, which could lead to catastrophe, especially if you put the camera in your LAN. Well, if you would have put it into a zone that is dedicated for the camera and the camera network has no access to the internal network, well, your camera will be eaten easily by someone, but that will be it, right? They'll be able to watch recordings of the camera, but they won't be able to get into your internal network and do plenty of other things. So in my case, the printer is in the IoT zone, but in your case, if you haven't done any network segregation, it will probably be from WAN to LAN. So you'll pick here from WAN going to the LAN here. In my case, it's from the WAN going to IoT zone. Then I will click on add at the bottom because I need to create an access rule to allow that traffic. Again, put a name that means something, because if you never name things, then you wonder in 3 years from now, what is this thing? Why did I put it? So that's why manufacturers like SonicWall and many other have name and description so you can enter information, but I'm sure you guys are like me and you never do it. So, okay, so the source. So here it's a bit different. We're looking at the packet itself, the source, everything on my packet, and destination stuff in my packet. So the packet comes from the WAN. The address, again, will be any. The service, here, be careful, don't pick HTTP in my case, right? Because here we're talking the source port of my packet. And like I explained in the beginning of the video, a IP packet have a source IP and a source port and a destination IP and a destination port. So when we talk port 80, for HTTP, that is the destination port. The source port is often and pretty much always a random port. So Here we just keep any, right? Any source port. Destination. Here we pick, again, our X1 IP. That is something that could be confusing to some, right? Here I'm picking IoT zone, but I'm picking an IP that is not in the IoT zone. So yes, they are always quirks and features for those of you guys that like cars and follow Doug DeMuro on YouTube. Quirks and features, that is one, right? All manufacturers have some, so here is one. And next here we'll pick HTTP. So again, my source and destination in my packet. So it comes from the WAN. It comes from any IP. The source port is whatever it is, because it's a random port usually. The destination is my IoT zone to the WAN IP here, and our destination port is HTTP. Later on, I'll show you things you can do here, but for now, we will just hit add. And now is time to try it. So what I'll do, I'll turn off Wi-Fi on my phone. So I will be on my data plan and I will try to access the resource. So I'll just show the IP here. Okay, so let me start recording on my phone. So I can add the recording of the phone in my video. So right now I have turned off the wireless on my phone, so I'm just on tethering on my data plan. So I'm outside my house, sort of. So let's put the IP address of my WAN interface of my SonicWall here, 74.15.153.100, and hit go. And as you can see, I have the picture, the web interface of my printer, and I see I need to buy some cartridge, and I can go, in all the different menus, and we see that it works. So we got it to work. Next thing, sometimes there are people that ask, when I'm outside, I'm able to, let's say in that case, go to the web interface of the printer or whatever the resource is, most likely a website, or a camera system, but when I'm inside, it does not work. So that is a DNS issue. So I'll just give you a nice diagram here. For those that know me for many years, I do a lot of those very ugly diagrams. So here is the issue you most likely face. So that's internet. That's your SonicWall. Its IP will do 1111 as being the external IP in that case. And we do have our web server. And here we do have our users. And so internet is connected here, and those two goes here. So what most likely happen is, if you try to connect from the inside and it does not work, but when you are on the outside, it does work, chances are the issue is a DNS issue. Well, let me add DNS. Well, 80/, yeah, a very common thing. You have a server that is Active Directory, DHCP, and your DNS. So we'll just put IP here. Then the firewall is 1. The web resource, whoops. And AD here. So here is my network, and of course this is connected here. So here we do have, let's say, a classic network. The firewall users, a user that have IP.10, firewall is .1, the web server we have is .2 and .3. Most likely the issue you have is here the default gateway is the firewall, so the IP.1. Your DNS server is your local DNS server, so the IP.3. And what happened is the user trying to connect to camera.yourdomain.com. But the issue is your Active Directory server here does not have a record for camera.yourdomain.com. So it goes out on the outside and then back in the inside to IP, to your external IP, when the actual traffic should have just done direct to the web server, right? Because it is local, so it's pointless to be in your network to go out and then back in. So that is a simple DNS issue. So what you need to do is go in your DNS server and create a entry for camera.mydomain.com without typos and put the IP of 192.168.1.2 so that when you are outside, when you're here, it will resolve this and go to your external IP and work. But when you are inside, your local DNS server will tell you the internal IP and you will just go straight there. So that is how to fix the issue for good. There is a way to do it with the firewall, but to me, it's more a band-aid. So if you are into that issue, I will put a knowledge base from SonicWall in the description on how to allow and do a NAT policy so people can go out to your external IP and be NAT back in where they came from. I'm not gonna show it here because I strongly advise you just fix the DNS issue rather than using the firewall to do a band-aid, because usually fixing the issue is better than a band-aid, right? So I will put a description, I'll put the link to a KB in the description of YouTube below. Next, one thing that I see too often and people believe it is a good way of doing security is to change the port. So they will do, for instance, remote desktop, but instead of doing remote desktop on 3389, they think that they are much smarter than worldwide hackers and will change the port for 3388 or 3390. And quite frankly, if hackers manage to inject cross-site scripting and get a remote system to execute code, I think they're smart enough to change the port, right? They can do a slow port scan and scan all the different ports, 10 port under, 10 port over, and find out that you changed the port. So it is not a way to do security, but I will still show you because sometimes it is useful. You may have two different things that require the same port, so you may want to change the port for one, for instance. So I'll show you how to do this. So we go back into our NAT, edit the NAT that we have. So see here, my service is HTTP. So that's the original packet. Remember the packet before it hits me, right? The packet I have no control over. So if I want to change access to my printer from port 80, which is HTTP, and change it for 81, I will need to change it here. So here I will say new service object, call it HTTP-81, for instance. Protocol, it is TCP, will be port 81 to 81, and hit save. Then when I do the translation, where I do the manipulation to send the traffic in my network, then here I will change service. It's not going to be original because it will throw it on port 81, but my printer answer on port 80, so that's not going to work. So here I will put HTTP. So remember here, my original packet, before it hits, it knocks on my door, and then manipulation I do are here. So packet come to my external IP on port 81. Then I do my NAT and I send it to the printer on port 80. So we'll save this. And we'll need to change our access rule as well. So we go into access rule, edit the rule we add, and the service here will pick our HTTP 81 and hit save. And I'll start recording on my phone again. So again, my phone is not on my Wi-Fi. I am on the internet right now. So see if I try again with port 80. See, it didn't work. I got a connection refuse. So now let's try port 81. And see, I got my printer back. Okay, next. Those are, like I mentioned, things I do not suggest. And actually, I will just disable the policy because I really don't like to have the entire world being able to connect to anything in my house. Next, of course, the best way to access resources from the outside is to create a VPN, right? So a client VPN, it can work on phones, it can work on laptop, Mac, and plenty of different things. So I've done videos, I'll put them in the description box down below, but with the firewall, you do have the ability to do two VPN client, IPsec VPN, which is with GVC, or you can also do SSL VPN with NET extender. Those, each firewall come with a specific amount of licenses included, so there is no fee. You can do VPN with the firewall. GVC will generally give you much more licenses, where SSL VPN will only give you one or two, depending on the model you pick. You may have to buy more if you want to go with it. So I'll put a link in the description box down below on a video I've done on SSL VPN on the firewall. And I also put a link to another video on the SMA, which is the dedicated work from home appliance that SonicWall has, that is a VPN client, as a VPN client as well. So that is, to me, the best way to access resources from the outside. Next, something else you could do is to go in either your access rule or the NAT policy and change the source. See here, addresses is any. Well, if you know that it's a third party that has a fixed IP that needs to connect, then you can put their fixed IP here, right? So I can just go here and say add address object, third party company, that their IP address is on the WAN, it's a host, and they have the IP 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, right? So then this NAT policy, in my case, my printer, will only be accessible from this IP. And again, you can, I've done it in the access rule. You could, if you want, also do it in your NAT policy, but security wise, one or the other will do. So see here, I believe it was third party company with this IP. So here I've put it on both. If you feel more comfortable doing it on both, go for it, but one of the two will work. Next, in the event where the third-party company does not have a fixed IP, or in any event where VPN client is not a accepted option, right? We see it sometimes, upper management, they pay you to do a job, but they don't want you to do your job well. So they don't want a VPN client, they just want it to work by magic from the outside without a VPN and hope for the best. We all know, not a good idea to have any here, right? So again, here, I'll just revert back my policy so it works on port 80. So one thing you can do with the firewall, if you want to open it from the outside, but not from a specific IP address, because the people connecting may have different IP addresses, and for whatever reason, a VPN client is not an accepted option. Something else you can do is leverage authentication on the firewall. So here my policy is still disabled. I'll show you how to create users first, and I'll just revert stuff I've done here. So it's back on HTTP. And here is original. So if we go back in my access role, see here we do have a option for users. See, right now it's include all, exclude none. So let's go and create a user. So that is into device, user, local user. See, I have one here, JP Talbot. Let's edit the password for this because I have no clue what it is. A, B, C, D, E, F. That's going to be the password. So I do have a local user on my firewall. If you want to create one, it's pretty easy. You just click on add user at the top here and you enter the name of the user, you give it a password, and that's pretty much it. You can put them in groups if you want, and then you can create access rules based on groups as well. But here I'll just do a user. Go into my policy, edit my policy, include, I'll pick my user, and something that is nice here, see, don't redirect unauthenticated user to login page. It is something you can turn on, and I will actually turn it on because I think it's cool, and it only works on web resources, right? So if you're trying to open remote desktop from the outside, only from a user, it's not going to redirect your remote desktop session to open Chrome and ask you for authentication, right? So that will only work with a web browser, which I'll show you here. Next thing, I need to turn on authentication on my WAN interface. So user login, HTTPS. I'm not going to say redirect HTTP to HTTPS. We'll just redirect. Actually, yes, I will, because my printer is on HTTP and not HTTPS. So see, user login, we'll do it that way. Redirect to HTTPS, and because I don't want to send credential in clear text on the internet. So on my WAN, I've turned on authentication from the outside. So little recap of what we're doing here. Good thing I did a recap. I forgot to re-enable the policy. So my access rule, as you can see, the address is still any. So every country, everyone in the planet is allowed to connect. The source, and then it's to my external IP and on HTTP. But here I did include a user. So only that user, only a authenticated user, JP Talbot, will be able to go through that policy. So JP Talbot can have any IP as long as it's JP Talbot. And my NAT remain the same. So let's give this a try. I will start recording the phone. So remove the port 81 and just go with port 80. And see, I am now redirected to a authentication page. So the firewall will redirect my web browsing to its external IP to force me to authenticate. So this show detail, visit the page, visit. And it tells me that I do need to authenticate to access that resource. So I'm going to click here to log in with JP Talbot, lowercase J, sorry, and A, B, C, D, E, F, then and go. Oh, and I've been told that my password is too short. A, B, C, D, E, F, and we'll do QWERTY. Yup, should do it. Of course, it's a demo, right? Pick better password, maybe do authentication with Active Directory would be even better. But here, just for demo purposes. So it tells me I am logged in successfully. I'm gonna hit continue. And it then open another tab in my phone. So if I go here, see, I now have my printer accessible and I can click on stuff and things are working. So that is with the automatic redirection. So I'll show you now if you're trying to access something that is, oops, sorry, not this, here, log out. And stop the recording on the phone. Okay. Next, I'll show you without the automatic redirection, right? So here I will go back in my access rule, edit that rule, user, and say don't redirect to authentication page, and hit save. And here is now how it is going to look. I'm just gonna take the IP again, 74, go. So as you can see, it doesn't work. So anyone from the outside, Australia, Canada, Russia, India, if they're trying to connect port 80 to your external IP, the firewall is just gonna block it, as you can see here, because they're not authenticated and only JP Talbot as a user is allowed to log in. So one thing I will do then is to authenticate to my firewall. And in my case, I changed the management port to 444 because I needed 443 to be open for other stuff. So I am connecting to the external IP of my firewall. I get prompted to enter username and password. So JP Talbot, capital J, lowercase j, and my password, QWERTYOUP. And I'm being told I am successfully authenticated. So now I can access whatever resource it is. It could be remote desktop, it could be anything you want, right? Whatever you've put in your access rule. In my case, it's to connect on port 80. So I will connect port 80 here, remove the S, not 81, 80, and it go. And it works. So I like doing this way because to me, it's more like a in-middle type of security, right? Opening remote desktop from the outside is a big no-no. That unless you're looking at being hacked within a couple hours or days, that then go for it. That's a great way of being hacked. It's funny because sometimes I see people like, hey JP, I don't know why I'm seeing millions of failed login attempt on my Active Directory server, which I open remote desktop from the outside. I'm like, I wonder why. So don't open ports from the outside like remote desktop to the entire world. That is purely begging to be hacked. So if you could do it on the best, again, top solution is go with a client VPN. Then if you cannot do VPN client because some will find it annoying and things like this, if it's a remote company that has a fixed IP, then just do a NAT from their fixed IP. That's good. Only them can connect. If you cannot, if they have a dynamic IP, I like to just force them through authentication first. You simply tell them, hey, you need to first log into this URL, which is the external IP of your firewall, with this user password, and then remote desktop will be open to you. Because if you go see here into device status, see, we see JP Talbot, which is the external IP of my firewall, of my phone, sorry, on the internet. So the firewall see an inbound request on port 80 coming from this IP. It knows, oh, this IP is JP Talbot. And if I look at my access rule, I only allow JP Talbot. So it's going to allow the traffic in. But if another IP tries to connect, firewall will say, well, you're not JP Talbot. You don't have an IP that JP Talbot used to log in. So therefore, I don't let you come in. So that is something I personally like doing. Again, like an in-middle type of security. I cannot do VPN, it's not an option. They don't have a fixed IP, but I don't want to open it to the entire world. So then I'll force them to first authenticate. That's something I like doing. So thanks for watching. I hope you've learned how to not do what you wanted to do and you found a way to make it more secured, right? Again, to me, opening ports from the outside without any control is a big no-no. Again, except if you have, for instance, an Exchange server where, you know, email needs to come in, but you will put a email security solution in front to do security, then that's much better. But you get my point, right? Opening remote desktop from the outside to the entire world is a big no-no. So I hope you learn how to make it happen and in a more secured way. So thanks for watching and see you in the next one.